Galactic Medical Station Omega-7 hung in space like a giant, neon-lit donut with delusions of grandeur. Its rotating rings housed the busiest emergency room in 3 spiral arms, a fact proudly displayed on a holographic billboard that also constantly updated the number of species successfully treated. Currently, that number stood at 4,217, not counting the ones that had accidentally been turned inside out, which the administration considered a statistical anomaly. Dr. Eleanor Murphy, to the few colleagues brave enough to attempt human nicknames, stared into her cup of what the station insisted was coffee, but tasted more like battery acid mixed with the tears of engineering interns. 6 months into her residency as the only human doctor at Omega-7, she had developed an immunity to both the pseudo-coffee and the chaos around her. Dr. Murphy. The gelatinous blob in Bay 3 is solidifying again, called out a floating orb, the station's medical assistant droid, which Eleanor had nicknamed Bob despite its protests that it preferred the designation M3D-1C4L-5555-1574N7-V3.2. Tell maintenance to turn up the heat and give it another shot of the enzymatics, Eleanor replied without looking up from her datapad. And make sure nobody mistakes it for the dessert special again. We can't afford another diplomatic incident. The night shift at Omega-7 was notorious throughout the United Galactic Medical Association. Only the desperate, the ambitious, or the slightly unhinged volunteered for it. Eleanor fell firmly into the third category, according to her former supervisors on Earth. They hadn't understood her insistence on joining the Interspecies Medical Exchange Program after finishing top of her class. Why trade a prestigious position at Johns Hopkins for an overcrowded space station where half the patients could kill you with an accidental sneeze? But here, among the 6-limbed, the telepathic, the photosynthesizing, and the occasionally radioactive, Eleanor found her calling. Humans might be newcomers to the galactic community, but they had one advantage that consistently surprised their alien counterparts: they had seen some seriously messed up stuff back on Earth. Incoming emergency transport. The station's alarm blared, a cacophony that somehow managed to sound urgent in 17 different tonal languages simultaneously. Priority Alpha. All available medical personnel to transport Bay 1. Eleanor downed the rest of her coffee, tossed the cup into a recycling chute, and straightened her white coat, the only traditional human medical attire she had insisted on keeping, despite the station's preference for sterile force field uniforms. Showtime, she muttered, striding toward the transport bay. Let's see what the universe has coughed up tonight. The transport bay doors hissed open with the dramatic flair of a sci-fi movie, complete with swirling mist, a side effect of the atmospheric equalizers struggling to compensate for the various breathing requirements of different species. Through the fog stumbled what appeared to be a walking fashion disaster with 3 times the usual number of opinions about it. Trilox, third assistant to the diplomatic envoy of the Tricephalian Confederation, was having the worst day of his 3 lives. His normally coordinated heads were in complete disarray. The left head was an alarming shade of purple, the middle one kept sneezing what looked like tiny glittering stars, and the right one appeared to be singing an opera while trying not to vomit. "Help us," shouted the left head. "I think I'm allergic to this dimension," wheezed the middle head between sneezes. "Adonna e mobile, oh stars, I'm going to be sick again," warbled the right head. 2 emergency medical technicians, one resembling a blue octopus in a hover chair, and the other seemingly made entirely of living crystal, guided the 3-headed diplomat to the triage area. They were followed by a harried-looking assistant carrying 3 separate briefcases, each monogrammed with different initials. Dr. Murphy. The voice that chittered and clicked beside Eleanor belonged to Nurse Tate, a 6-foot praying mantis-like being who was the most skilled triage nurse on the station and perpetually convinced that humans were made of wet tissue paper. Step back. The Tricephalian might release defensive spores. Your fragile human respiratory system will dissolve. Eleanor didn't step back. Instead, she approached the 3-headed patient with the casual confidence of someone who had once pulled a live ferret out of a frat boy's digestive tract during her ER rotation. "Hello there," she addressed all 3 heads equally. "I'm Dr. Murphy. Can you tell me what's happening?" The 3 heads spoke simultaneously, creating a cacophony of complaints, accusations, and at least one verse of Puccini. Nurse Kreuzkek's antennae twitched anxiously. "Doctor, perhaps we should call for the containment team. Or at least get you a hazmat suit, your soft human exoskeleton." "I'm fine," Kreuzek, Eleanor replied, pulling out her diagnostic scanner. "And technically it's an endoskeleton, but who's counting?" The middle head of Trilox sneezed, sending a shower of bioluminescent particles into the air. Several nearby monitors flickered and displayed what looked suspiciously like Tricephalian stock quotes before returning to normal. "Interesting," Eleanor murmured, watching her scanner's readings. "According to this, all three heads are experiencing completely different symptoms. That's not normal for Tricephalian physiology, is it?" "No," shouted the left head, now an even deeper shade of purple. "We are experiencing head discord. It is extremely rare and extremely painful. Not to mention embarrassing," added the middle head miserably between sneezes. "The Galactic Council meeting is tomorrow, and we're the key speaker on unified consciousness legislation." Suan Dornara contributed the right head before gagging dramatically. Eleanor tapped her scanner thoughtfully. "Head discord. I've read about this. Normally your three brains operate in perfect harmony, sharing a singular consciousness distributed across three processing centers. But something's causing them to desynchronize. From across the triage area, other doctors were gathering a floating cloud of sentient gas wearing a translator badge, a reptilian surgeon with too many fingers, and a being that appeared to be a walking mushroom with medical credentials embroidered on its cap. All were maintaining a safe distance. Murphy called the mushroom doctor. "That's Ambassador Trilox. We should call in the specialists from the Tricephalian homeworld." "That would take 7 standard hours," Eleanor replied, still scanning, "and judging by these readings, we don't have that kind of time." She looked up at the 3 suffering heads and made a decision. "Let's get you to exam room 3. Kreuzek, I need a full biochemical workup, neural synchronization scans, and someone to find me a universal translator that can handle 3 simultaneous inputs without exploding." As they wheeled Trilox away, the diplomat's assistant scurried alongside Eleanor. "Doctor, is there anything you can do? The future of interstellar diplomacy may depend on Trilox's recovery." Eleanor's eyes gleamed with the confidence that had made her both famous and infamous back on Earth. "Trust me," she said. "This isn't even the strangest case I've seen this week." Exam room 3 buzzed with activity as various alien medical professionals scanned, prodded, and generally panicked around the 3-headed diplomat. The left head had progressed from purple to a shade of magenta not previously documented in medical literature. The middle head's sneezes now produced small, temporary wormholes that briefly revealed glimpses of other parts of the station. The right head had moved on from opera to what sounded suspiciously like early 21st century Earth pop songs, occasionally interrupted by dry heaves. "The neural patterns are completely erratic," declared Dr. Flossum, the mushroom-capped neurologist, waving appendages frantically at the holographic display. "The 3 consciousness centers are operating on entirely different wavelengths. Perhaps we should put them in separate containment units until specialists arrive," suggested the gaseous Dr. Wumpel, whose cloud form pulsed anxiously with each new alarming symptom. Eleanor stood quietly at the foot of the bio-bed, reviewing the test results while the alien doctors proposed increasingly dramatic interventions. She pulled up Trilox's medical history on her datapad, absently batting away a mini wormhole that tried to form near her ear. "Has anyone asked what they ate in the last 24 hours? She finally said. "Hey." The room fell silent, except for the right head's rendition of Baby One More Time. "Irrelevant," declared Dr. Vornak, a semi-gelatinous centaurian who had just slithered into the room. As chief of medicine, he made it his personal mission to remind everyone, particularly Eleanor, that human medical practices were primitive at best. Tricephalians have triple redundant digestive systems. Food poisoning is impossible. Eleanor raised an eyebrow but continued undeterred. "Humor me. Trilox, what have all 3 of you consumed recently?" The 3 heads conferred with each other in whispered Tricephalian before the left head answered. its color fading momentarily to a more normal lavender. Nothing unusual. Just the standard diplomatic reception fare at the Arcturian embassy last night. Wait. Eleanor held up her hand. The Arcturians, with their famous mood-enhancing cocktails? Yes. The middle head sneezed violently, creating a wormhole through which they could briefly see the hospital cafeteria. Very innovative beverages, each one designed to enhance a different emotional state. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The scene reminded her of her residency back at Chicago General Hospital, specifically the infamous Tuesday Night Madness, when the city's most experimental nightclub had served cocktails infused with untested synthetic pheromones. She treated 17 patients who couldn't stop dancing, 3 who believed they'd become furniture, and 1 who had developed a temporary but intense romantic attachment to the vending machine. "Let me guess," she said, opening her eyes. "Each head drank a different cocktail?" The 3 heads looked at each other guiltily. The diplomatic handbook said nothing against it, defended the left head, flushing purple again. "Oops, I did it again," sang the right head before covering its mouth to suppress another gag. Eleanor turned to the assembled alien doctors. "It's simple. Arcturian mood cocktails are psychoactive compounds designed to enhance specific emotional states. For most species with a single consciousness, they just create a temporary mood shift, but for a Tricephalian, with 3 interconnected consciousness centers, continued Nurse Krozig-Teg, antennae perking up in understanding. Each center is now operating under a different psychoactive influence," Eleanor finished. The left head had the anger enhancer, hence the color change and aggression. The middle had the anxiety cocktail, causing the sneezing and spatial anomalies. Tricephalian anxiety responses are linked to their latent dimensional manipulation abilities. And the right head. "You are the dancing queen, young and sweet." Clearly had the euphoria with a side effect of nausea, Eleanor concluded. The alien doctors stared at her in disbelief. Trilox's assistant looked horrified at the diplomatic implications. "But how do we fix it?" demanded Dr. Vornak. "We can't have an ambassador showing up to the Galactic Council in this condition." Trilox's middle head sneezed miserably, creating a wormhole that briefly revealed what looked like the inside of a storage closet where 2 station staff members were engaged in activities definitely not in their job descriptions. The diplomat looked at Eleanor with all 3 sets of eyes. "Can you help us, Doctor? The Arcturian embassy insists there's no antidote. The effects must run their natural course, whatever that means." Eleanor smiled, the same smile that had reassured countless patients in Chicago when they came in with objects stuck in places objects really shouldn't be. "I've seen worse," she said with absolute confidence. "Tuesday shifts in Chicago prepared me for anything with less than 5 heads. We'll have you synchronized and diplomatically functional in no time." "Your plan is to do what?" Dr. Vornak's gelatinous form quivered with indignation, causing the medals on his medical sash to clink against each other. Eleanor was already programming the medical replicator, her fingers flying over the alien interface. "We're going to treat this like what it is, a bad trip. Each head needs individualized treatment to counteract its specific cocktail effect, followed by neural synchronization therapy." Preposterous. Vornak oozed closer, looming over her shoulder. "The Tricephalian neural structure is far too complex for such a primitive approach. We need quantum neural realignment, consciousness partition barriers, perhaps even temporary consciousness suspension." With all due respect, Eleanor replied without looking up. "Those treatments would take hours to prepare and might cause permanent damage to the ambassador's shared memory centers. We don't have that kind of time." The replicator hummed and produced 3 different colored solutions in medical-grade dispensers. Eleanor took them and approached Trilox, who was looking increasingly miserable, the left head now pulsating between magenta and scarlet, the middle head sneezes creating increasingly larger wormholes, and the right head weakly humming what sounded like funeral dirges between bouts of nausea. "Ambassador Trilox, I'm going to administer a different solution to each head. They're based on old Earth remedies for substance interactions, modified for Tricephalian biochemistry." That's barely more advanced than leeches, Vornak exclaimed, his form rippling dramatically. Eleanor ignored him and addressed the three heads directly. Left head, you're getting a modified anxiety reducer with sedative properties to counteract the anger enhancer. Middle head, yours is an anti-nausea compound with dimensional stabilizers. Right head, a specially formulated mood stabilizer to bring down that euphoria while settling your stomach. Will it hurt? Asked all three heads simultaneously, the first synchronized response she'd heard from them. Less than your current condition, Eleanor assured them, and certainly less than whatever Dr. Vornak was planning with his quantum neural realignment. She administered the solutions while Nurse Kruzek hovered nearby, medical emergency kit at the ready, clearly convinced the human doctor was about to dissolve their important diplomatic guest. Now for the synchronization therapy, Eleanor said, pulling a device from the medical cabinet that looked suspiciously like a modified Earth tablet computer connected to three headsets. This will help realign your neural patterns once the counteracting agents begin to work. Dr. Vornak's translucent form darkened with alarm. That's a harmonized neural interface. It's only rated for recreational use, playing music and simple games across shared consciousness species. Exactly. Eleanor nodded. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. The ANI works by encouraging synchronized brain activity through shared sensory input. It's perfect for this situation. She placed the three headsets on Trilox's heads and tapped on the tablet screen. I've programmed it with a specially designed sequence that should help your three consciousness centers realign naturally. What kind of sequence? Asked the middle head between increasingly weaker sneezes. Eleanor smiled. A classic Earth puzzle game that requires cooperative thinking. Each head will see one part of the puzzle, but you'll need all three perspectives to solve it. As you work together, your neural patterns should naturally synchronize. Dr. Vornak made a sound like gelatin being slapped. This is absurd. You're treating a severe case of consciousness dissonance with games? Not just any game, Eleanor replied, starting the program. Tetris Cooperative Edition. Specifically designed for multi-consciousness therapy by the Jun Nakamura Neurological Institute. As the program began, the three heads initially struggled, arguing among themselves. But after 15 minutes, their focus shifted from their symptoms to the game. The left head's color began to normalize, the middle head's sneezes became less frequent and dimensional, and the right head stopped singing and started offering constructive suggestions about block placement. Eleanor monitored their neural patterns on her scanner, nodding with satisfaction. Neural synchronization improving by 37% already. The medication is dampening the effects of the cocktails, and the cooperative gameplay is rebuilding their shared neural pathways. Dr. Vornak hovered nearby, his gelatinous form slightly less agitated as he watched the improving readings. I suppose there is a certain elegance to the simplicity, he admitted grudgingly. Though I still maintain that quantum neural realignment would be the proper procedure. Sometimes the old ways work best, Eleanor replied. Humans have been dealing with bad trips and their aftermath since we figured out which plants did weird things to our consciousness. We've had a lot of practice. Just as things seemed to be improving, alarms suddenly blared throughout the room. Trilox's vital signs plummeted across all three heads, and the neural interface sparked ominously. A neural cascading failure, shouted Nurse Kruzek. All three consciousness centers are crashing simultaneously. The three heads went limp, the game forgotten as Trilox's shared systems began shutting down. Dr. Vornak surged forward. I knew it. Human methods are too crude. We need emergency quantum suspension before we lose the ambassador completely. Eleanor's expression remained calm, though her mind raced through possibilities. No, she said firmly. That's exactly what we don't need right now. To clear the room. Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of someone who had once talked a drunk telekinetic through removing his own appendix during a Chicago blizzard. Except you, Kruzek. I need your hands. The other doctors protested, especially Dr. Vornak, whose gelatinous form quivered with indignation, but something in Eleanor's tone had them all backing toward the door. What are you planning? Kruzik's mandibles clicked nervously as the medical monitors continued their alarming symphony. Something that's not in any Galactic Medical Association handbook, Eleanor replied, already moving to the supply cabinet. Get me a standard neural stimulator, 3 consciousness grounding rods, and whatever you use here instead of duct tape. While Kruzik gathered supplies, Eleanor examined Trilox's readings more carefully. The 3 heads lay unconscious, their normally vibrant skin tone fading to a worrying grey. But something in the neural patterns caught her attention, a rhythmic fluctuation that shouldn't be there. It's a feedback loop, she muttered. The counteragents are working, but the neural interface triggered a synchronization too quickly. They're all syncing to the wrong pattern. She grabbed the equipment from Kruzik Tate and began modifying the neural stimulator, bypassing safety protocols and rerouting power connections in ways that made the insectoid nurse's antennae stand straight up in alarm. Dr. Murphy, that configuration exceeds all safety parameters. Safety parameters are for doctors who have options, Eleanor replied, connecting the consciousness grounding rods to her modified device. In Chicago, we called this a neural reboot. Hold these stabilizing clamps exactly where I show you. Working with practiced efficiency, Eleanor positioned the grounding rods at specific points around each of Trilox's heads. The modified neural stimulator hummed ominously, small arcs of energy dancing between its components. This will interrupt the feedback loop and give each consciousness center a chance to reset to its natural frequency, she explained, making final adjustments. Like turning it off and back on again, but with brains. That's not a recognized medical procedure, Kruzik Tate protested. It is on Earth, Eleanor replied. We just don't put it in the manuals because the lawyers would have a field day. She checked Trilox's declining vital signs once more. We're out of time. On my mark, activate the clamps simultaneously. 3, 2, 1 now. Kruzik Tate pressed the activation controls. The device surged with energy, and for one terrifying moment, all of Trilox's readings flatlined completely. The monitors wailed in alarming synchronization. Then, one by one, each head gasped and jerked upright, eyes wide open. System reboot complete, said the left head calmly. General synchronization at 97.3% and climbing, added the middle head. I feel like I've been hit by an asteroid hopper, but at least I'm not singing anymore, concluded the right head. Eleanor checked her scanner, a smile breaking across her face as the reading stabilized. Neural patterns returning to baseline harmony, the vital signs stabilizing across all systems. The door slid open as Dr. Vornak and the other physicians rushed back in, drawn by the sudden silence of the previously screaming monitors. Impossible. Dr. Vornak oozed forward, his gelatinous form rippling with disbelief as he examined the readings. How did you counteract a complete neural cascade failure with that contraption? Eleanor was already disconnecting her makeshift device. Sometimes you don't need quantum realignment or consciousness suspension. Sometimes you just need to interrupt a bad pattern and let the body remember how it's supposed to work. Trilox blinked all 6 eyes in perfect synchronization. Dr. Murphy, you have our deepest gratitude. The Tricephalian Confederation will not forget this. All part of the service, Eleanor replied, making notes in her datapad, though I do recommend avoiding Arcturian cocktails in the future, or at least making sure all 3 heads drink the same one. 2 days later, Eleanor sat in the station's observation lounge, enjoying a rare moment of quiet with a cup of what the replicator insisted was chamomile tea, but tasted suspiciously like liquid air freshener. Through the massive viewport, she watched the diplomatic vessels departing after the successful Galactic Council meeting. Dr. Murphy. The familiar clicking voice of Nurse Kruzik Tate approached from behind. Ambassador Trilox's shuttle just departed. The neural synchronization has remained stable at 99.8 better than their baseline before the incident. Eleanor nodded. Good to hear. How did the speech go? The unified consciousness legislation passed unanimously, Kruzik replied, settling into a chair designed for insectoid anatomy. And the ambassador added a special amendment, the Murphy Protocol for emergency medical treatment across species barriers without waiting for specialized care. That's got to be ruffling some gelatinous feathers. Eleanor chuckled, thinking of Dr. Vornak's reaction. As if summoned by the thought, the chief of medicine oozed into the lounge, his translucent form somehow managing to convey both authority and reluctant respect. Dr. Murphy, he acknowledged with what passed for a nod among his species. The Galactic Medical Association has requested your complete report on the Tricephalian neural resynchronization procedure. They're considering adding it to the standard emergency protocols. Eleanor nearly choked on her fake tea. You're kidding. I never kid, Doctor. It would require solidifying partially, which is uncomfortable. Vornak's form rippled slightly, what Eleanor had come to recognize as the Centaurian equivalent of clearing one's throat. I have also been instructed to reevaluate our perspective on human medical practices. Your species' experience with self-inflicted neurochemical disasters appears to have unexpected benefits in interspecies medicine. With that backhanded compliment delivered, he oozed away toward a group of administrators across the lounge. Krozik's antennae twitched in what Eleanor now recognized as amusement. That's the closest thing to an apology you'll get from him. Your reputation has spread across the station, the human doctor who can handle anything without flinching. If only they knew about my first-year residency, Eleanor laughed. After you've seen a grown man with a complete model solar system, where no solar system should ever be, a three-headed diplomat with a bad trip barely registers on the weird scale. Her communicator chimed with an emergency alert. Bob, the medical assistant orb, zoomed into the lounge, pulsing with urgent light patterns. Dr. Murphy. Emergency in Bay 4. A heptapodian merchant captain is experiencing simultaneous molting of all 7 limb clusters while merging with their sentient ship's AI due to a malfunctioning neural interface. Dr. Vornak is requesting your presence specifically. Eleanor sighed, set down her not-quite tea, and stood up. Tell him I'll be right there. And have someone bring me coffee, real coffee from my personal stash, not the replicator abomination. As she strode toward the exit, Krozak called after her, Do you think you can help with this one too? Eleanor didn't break stride as she called back over her shoulder, 7 simultaneously molting limb clusters merging with a sentient AI. Please. I once treated a fraternity that decided to meld their consciousness with their smart refrigerator during finals week. This is just Tuesday in space. As the doors slid closed behind her, Eleanor smiled to herself. She'd finally found a place where her particular brand of unflappable medical pragmatism was appreciated. And if the universe wanted to keep throwing its weirdest cases at her, well, she'd seen worse.